Welcome to the Operate Podcast, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at company building from the perspective of the builders themselves. This is how we operate.
Welcome to the Operate Podcast. I'm Kerry Ransom. Today's episode is sponsored by Operate, a new tech startup investment and company building platform based right here in Southern California. We've got a number of amazing founders already in the Operate family. If you're looking for help with your startup or opportunities to work with the next generation of high growth companies or want to be part of this community, you can go to operatestudio.com to learn more. I'm super excited to have Nick Cromydas with me on the show today. Before we get to hear from him though, let me tell you a little bit about Nick. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of Hunt Club, a new category of search firm. And so we'll talk about that today for sure. He's about 5 years in, and he's been through a great entrepreneurial journey already. And so we definitely want to hear about some of those steps along the way. He also is founder of New Coast Ventures, which invests in and co-creates companies. We both have worked closely with so many founders. We often are sharing these founder stories in kind of that early stage, company creation, early building. And so we'll definitely cover some of that today as well. He's been super active in the Chicago startup scene for a number of years. And we recently realized just how many mutual friends we had in common there as well. He's also a tennis player. I don't think I've told him that I purported to be one back in the day. And he also is a coach. And I want to talk specifically about some of that experience because I find that coaching is often a great skill development around leadership and other elements of life as well. So I want to talk about that. Nick, thanks for joining me. Really excited to have you on the show this morning.
Appreciate you having me, Kerry. I was excited to chat in small world with the 10,000 mutual friends across the Midwest and West Coast, and
Absolutely.
excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I gave a brief intro to Hunt Club. Let's talk about the sort of founding story. How did it come about, and give me the journey in the early days?
Yeah. So I spent, no time in the recruiting space before starting Hunt Club. I was building New Coast, which you mentioned, and really it came out of just a personal observation I had in how recruiting worked and just a fascination on a couple different ways. So it was, I think it was like 2014, maybe early 15. I had a friend that was running a practice at a large executive search firm, and he kept winning these digitally oriented searches. So think of like a VP of marketing for a Series C company or a CMO for a Series C company. And he was really running the CPG practice at this firm. So he didn't really understand digital as well. And I was fortunate to have spent, the last 5-7 years getting integrated in the whole digital world, through a ton of different ventures we participated in. And so the recruiter would like really look at my LinkedIn and just say, "Hey, what do you think about this person? Do you think they're a good fit? Can you introduce me?" And lo and behold, like one summer, I think I made, roughly 10 to 15 introductions for various searches, and I placed 4 or 5 roles for the guy. And the funny thing was, I kept getting emails back from the people that I would introduce saying, "Nick, I actually took that new job that you introduced me to, and I'm excited about it. And thank you, because I wasn't looking. I may have never considered it had it not been for our relationship." And that like was kind of like wait, what is this industry? And spent some time, with my friend who was running the practice, and found out that he booked something like $500,000 in fees through these introductions. And it just like made me fascinated about the model, how the recruiting world works. So I spent some time shadowing some of the bigger firms, and we're fortunate that we had some great relationships, and kind of just saw that many of them don't really use technology at all. It's still, Excel spreadsheets, LinkedIn, cell phones, and email. And then I also saw that the best recruiters that we got to shadow had these incredible networks that they curated, cultivated, and called on. And so I thought to myself, why don't we build a different model? Why don't we put a best-in-class service in place with great, teammates? We call them talent partners at Hunt Club, but build technology to automate the parts of the process you can, augment the parts you can't, and then build this massive expert network of business leaders to help refer your next great hire. And that was kind of the origin story. So, got one customer, Kerry, and and convinced them to let us do one search for them for $1,000. And I got a couple of my friends, it was in Cincinnati, Ohio, to give me their LinkedIn Excel exports, and pretended to be the technology by emailing them, hey, I saw Bobby's in your network, type in yes if you'd refer him for a search, and ended up placing the role with a referral, and paid an expert in our network $1,000 for that introduction. And that was kind of our first MVP. So, at that point, have been building the business since.
Very cool. So the model today, because it's interesting, you learned on the executive search community, but you're kind of competing against them now.
Yeah.
And so is there a model where you see, including them in this, or how do you see, what have you learned that maybe was different than what you originally thought about the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think what I originally learned that's quite a bit different than what I expected, or what I learned that's quite a bit different than what I expected, is there's a big, and I had some instincts towards this. So I'd say we're quite competitive with some boutique firms,
Sure.
almost complementary. And we have a large national partnership with, one of the biggest executive search firms. There's a large growing market for technology focused companies. That are a totally different skill set that what most firms or recruiting companies, frankly, in the world really understand. And so for us, I think, I didn't really understand how big that gap was. And so I think where we can be a really good complement to some of them is as a partner to help them think through some of the searches that they don't have expertise on, and almost like a referral partnership. And so I think like that's really kind of capturing our opportunity, I think, is as the world's changed and tech companies become large companies and big companies need to transform through digital, we think a modern approach is the most effective way to help service this type of customer. And so we're trying to build kind of a modern search firm.
Yeah. To me, it makes total sense, because I agree with you, that gap. I'd love to go one step deeper on that. So what is it about these existing firms that you think is the gap? Because from my perspective, I feel like, I call it laziness, that they're literally trying to find the person that looks exactly like maybe who was there before to replace them, or an upgrade. And so they don't help companies make that digital leap, as an example, right? They're sort of stuck in neutral, or maybe even backward looking from my perspective. And so and I look at it personally, like I haven't had a resume in 20 years, and I'm probably the hardest person for a search professional to place, as an example, right? Because I make their job really hard, and yet, there are few people in the world that probably have the scope of experiences that I have, right? And so that to me is like the quintessential example, probably an extreme example of where I feel like they're not very valuable. Is they're kind of highly paid salespeople as opposed to true problem solvers. So I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, and I think that point that you have, Carrie, is getting even more exposed as the world's changing, right? Because if you look at most of our customers, if they're recruiting for an executive, like, you actually have the perfect background for it. A general athlete that's done quite a bit across functionally, different businesses, seen small, seen big, seen small and grown, seen big and transformed. So I think, it's more of a DNA and a really a type of company problem. So if you look at most of the recruiting marketplace, so if you were to essentially aggregate, the Korn Ferry, Heidrick and Struggles, Spencer Stewart, Egon Zender, they, in the executive search market, they're probably close to, 50 to 60% of all the revenue, right? And most of their customers are primarily large businesses. And so really, since they focus on that type of demographic of customer, it's harder for them to understand what it's like to be at a Series B company that's got 13 months of runway, that needs to get the right CRO in place. Otherwise, they won't hit their metrics to raise their Series C. And it's almost like an entirely different language to most of them. And so I think the DNA of who many of these really successful firms' customers have been for the last 100 years, hasn't given the ability to change as quickly with the time on who are going to be, you know, the Johnson and Johnsons, the Proctors, and the Abbott Labs of the next 100 years, which may be the, you know, the, I don't know, maybe will be the Zooms and the you know, different portfolio companies of Facebook, or the, you know, the non-acquired Dollar Shave Clubs of the world. So
yeah, I think that's a fascinating point. And, you know, the funny thing from my perspective is I'm almost too close to it, right? I've done so much recruiting in my career that I actually feel like I'm really good at this because it's about problem solving, and you're thinking that you really deeply understand this rapid culture and change, and that's not for everyone. And sometimes somebody coming out of a big company is ready for that. Sometimes the body's going to reject that organ really, really quickly, right? And so I think those are the boots on the ground skills that not enough people in executive search have. So I applaud you for really seeing that, because it is, I couldn't agree more that how clear that opportunity is. So that takes me to sort of my next question, which is, what's your view? Obviously, the last 9 months has been this fascinating change, and particularly around talent in the digital market. We've seen the bigger companies and a lot of the smaller Series B type ones that you described really say, hey, we're going geographically unbounded. And what do you think that means now for the world of talent and search?
Yeah, it changes everything. Because now if you think about it, like the restriction of you have to hire somebody in my market, or the market of the company, wherever the headquarters are, the role is based, like it's been relatively thrown out the window. I think it's like, we did a quick poll on our customers. It's like 85% of our customers used to have geographic restrictions. Now 70% of them are saying hire the best talent anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think it makes it actually quite a bit challenging, because in a world where you can kind of pool talent from anywhere,
that's right.
Most people are still want to hire based on trust, right? So regardless of, and it's certainly for more senior roles as you get to managers, directors, VPs, and C-level, but it's, not only do I want to hire somebody, I want to understand what they've done from somebody I trust to know they're going to be a great fit for culturally our company, or functionally they can, you know, execute on whatever the parameters are. So I think it makes things really complex for companies now, where it's, you know, most recruiting firms are set up to be really functionally deep in something, but still their networks are very much based in the geography they live in, or the geography they focus on. So I think it gives us like quite a bit of opportunity, because we build a great community in Los Angeles, like we have, or a great community in Chicago of business leaders and experts, and find our carries. You know, there's only one carry, but find our carries in every market. We can really lean on those types of experts to help us find awesome people that will fit a customer in Chicago, or fit a customer in Minneapolis. And I think it gives, you know, it's going to change and expose these larger recruiting firms for the first time. So I think their lack of reach and density at a national level, and give an opportunity for I think a wide range of modern players to really gain market share. So
yeah, it seems like it's just fuel for you, because of exactly what you said. That trust network is so key. And I can just envision a recruiter who is now looking at, whether they're in a company or outside, going, all right, now I have the world to potentially find talent in. I mean, it's almost a like paradox of choice issue. So how do you get really methodical about determining that the priority even of what is the right order of elements to create the right fit or the right candidates? Because it's funny, you know, with that unboundedness from my perspective, now if I'm opening my front door, if I'm a company and I've got, you know, instead of 100 applicants, I now have 1,000 applicants.
Yeah.
Now I just look at this is increased noise. So yeah, it seems like this is, if anything, is just rapid fuel on your fire.
Yeah.
I think so. Like it.
And I think the virtualization of talent, the software companies growing through everyone having to rely on, you know, different tools and platforms now, you know, the tailwinds you're seeing just from, you know, all sorts of home delivery, on-demand delivery, like I think I think the statistic McKinsey came out with, like most large companies' digital transformation roadmap is, 6 years ahead of what they had thought now.
Mm.
And like, if you actually look at the third quarter, I think there was like something like $36 or $7 billion of venture invested domestically, which is the second highest quarter ever. So I think like a lot of people are believing that these next gen companies are on the rise, and this is an opportunity to start in an environment that's new. And I think for us, if we bet on a thesis 4 or 5 years ago that digital will be everything in the future, and there's a gap between understanding this level of talent, providing this level of talent for these types of companies, our hope is we can capitalize on it.
Very cool. So back to this kind of network question, if I ask you, how should I be developing my personal network in this new world? What advice would you have for someone?
Yeah. I think it's a couple things. I think it's the best connections in life to me, and the most helpful and the most authentic, are always rooted in authenticity. And I know that's like a pretty generalist comment, but like, I think that the challenge in this environment is like the moments of serendipity and organic connection are not there anymore. So, meeting somebody on the golf course, or going to a networking event, or having a buddy that you had lunch with make an introduction to somebody just because you had a conversation about a problem, right? So I think you have to be way more deliberate about, how you connect with people and things you get involved with. And one thing I love, and I feel like it's paid dividends over the years, is, and especially in this environment, is like really setting up some of the more authentic conversations with, folks that you can really help, whether it's other founders or other startups, and just really adding value, whether it's customer introductions or helping problem solve. And then that, we've seen that over years just pay dividends as far as karma come back in tons of different ways. So I think, depending on the stage that you're at in your career, I would be really deliberate about, what you really want to get out of a conversation, and really deliberate about, how do you create help for others? Because I think in this environment, a 30-minute Zoom is a way different experience than a casual cup of coffee and a walk. So you have to be a little bit more deliberate on what the outcomes and the objectives and how you can help each other is.
Great advice. Yeah, it's funny. When my kids were young, I taught adjunct at a local university here for several years. And one of the modules I taught was on networking. And my 3 rules of networking were give, and give some more. And I think your point in this environment, I feel like that's really the opportunity, is if you can stand out as somebody who's just overly generous with proactivity and help, I think that is a way to really cut through what's happening right now.
Totally.
So,
and those that haven't gotten to a maturity curve in their career to help as much, right? Like, there's still things that they can do, and it's all about follow through, I think, at that point as well, where it's those who'd help you like continue to follow through on how it went and what you're doing, and creates authentic relationships.
That's right. Yeah, it's the ones, I mean, I can think of one here. She's really young, just starting her career, and it's the ones not that do one thing and then they kind of wait for, okay, I did this one thing, what are you going to do for me now? It's the ones that do 1 and then 2 and then 3, and you go, wow, they're different, right? They stand out, and then they're and I think it's that memorability is a big part of what you can do. So great advice. So, I mean, we've got a ton of people out of work right now. We've got big things to solve in the country. As you think about, I'll call it supply demand. I'm kind of an economist at my core. If you think about this imbalance of demand supply, where are you seeing the biggest gap of high demand, low supply right now, that we can sort of tell the market, hey, this is where the opportunity is for people that are looking to reskill, change jobs, change careers?
Yeah. So I think and I love marketplaces too. So I love speaking those terms. So we're good. So I think it's a couple of different places. Some will be quite obvious, others maybe not so much. So obviously across engineering and technology, building software for different types of businesses, massive supply imbalance, tons of demand across large, small, big companies, and tons of activity in the marketplace. A less obvious one actually is in software sales.
Mm.
So there's not, I think about most of our customers, most of our software companies gain such tremendous leverage by having an internal and external sales force. And so I think that model has been, certainly proven out with the Salesforce and hundreds of others who really, build the product and lever Salesforce to grow it. So like there's not enough software experienced sellers in the marketplace to service the demand in the marketplace. So I think there's a massive rescaling opportunity for those that have sales experience in a wide range of different industries and teaching them the dynamics of software versus some of the other things in media or retail or whatever it might be. So I see a huge opportunity there. And then I think also there's a huge opportunity across, various parts of like the marketing stack as well, or the marketing functions. So revenue operations, marketing operations, like figuring out how to build the operational machine to help grow an engine for, a B2B company is something that we see a massive supply imbalance as well. And then, of course, data science and like, you can't find enough data scientists, and the universities can't churn them out fast enough to help solve some of the problems that we have.
So do you see, I mean, great examples. I think that's super helpful. Do you see sufficient training and development programs out there in these areas? As I think about your discussion, for example, of sales, I feel like in the high growth companies that I've been in, where sales is a critical part of the revenue or go to market, often you're growing so fast that you're not actually developing people in the right way, and it's a little bit of a churn and burn. And so I'm not sure in the companies is always the best. I mean, that's been a lot of startup skill development over the years, is learn by doing, learn by messing things up. But do you see third parties out there really doing a good job? I mean, I don't think the Sandlers of the world, for example, are probably equipping the next generation of software sellers right now.
Yeah, a lot of people are attacking the problem in different ways. There's a great group in, there's actually a couple. There's a couple in Chicago. There's one called Sales Assembly that really tries to educate, and they're getting bigger throughout the Midwest. Educate the community on like getting early stage sellers trained and equipped. You see it happening, not at the scale or I think at the focus yet, or the level of investment to really solve the problem. And I think another huge challenge is like a lot of software companies are trying to grow so fast with a short period of time with, if you raise capital, you have 18 months of life. So they can't really focus on investing in their people as much as maybe some of these training programs. So I'm hopeful that like someone creates, here's a startup idea that I've wanted to do for a long time, is Lambda School for software sales.
Yes.
Like it can be virtual. There's tons of people that are classically trained in sales. They can get a great bump in pay if they learn how to do it in a different medium and software. So like I think the model makes a ton of sense to shift towards that. And I'm hopeful we see more of it because I think it'll solve a great problem.
I'm right here. I think you and I should incubate it, right? Like I totally agree with you. And so that, put a pin in that for right now, but I want to revisit it, and, we'll talk offline.
I'm in.
So one of the things I'd love to get into on the show is kind of how how people operate, like what, their methodology, their values. So in the early stages of companies, you have to play so many roles. And that is, something we focus on at the studio here is, how do we keep you in your area of genius so you don't have to go figure all these things out? Because part of the process of figuring that out is really inefficient and can cost time, can cost money. And so what's something along the way in Hunt Club that you have had to figure out, that you look back and go, man, I really hope I never have to, maybe didn't want to have to figure it out, or hope I never have to again?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably been so many that it's hard to pinpoint one, but like, I think like in the early days of our business, like I ran like all of our accounting, all of our accounts payable, accounts receivable, all of our like budgeting and planning, like really like was kind of our financial nucleus, which is very scary. So if our investors are listening, we've got it cleaned up now 3 or 4 years into it, but
you're not the first, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so it's like those types of things. I think the challenge is when you do this for the first time or even the second time, you learn a ton about yourself and like truly what is your zone of genius. And then I think maybe your third or fourth or fifth venture, then like you can really optimize from that from the beginning. So I want to only do this.
Yes.
And this will help create enterprise value. And I'm going to go find two partners that can totally take away the rest so that we do this faster. So I think for us, in the early days, like I kind of wanted to do a little bit of everything so that I really learned our business. I wasn't sure what I was great at yet. I had instincts on what I could do and deliver value uniquely, but you're kind of learning a lot about yourself and you're learning about what's right for yourself in your company. And then, I think now 5 years into this business, and then certainly about 7 or 8 years into the other one, you've got like more clear picture on what you should let go of and what you should find someone who's infinitely better than you. So I think, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. So accounting and finance, like I can help on strategic finance. I should never be doing, our accounting systems. I think in a world of short and focus, and I'm more externally facing for our company, someone that's really helping us like check and keep our management systems in process and making sure our metrics are up to date and really kind of aligning internal functions collaboratively. Like that's not my zone of genius. And so I think it's been great learnings across the board on how to do the things you love to do to create the energy to create growth.
What's the one thing you have developed as a either an insight about yourself or a skill that has surprised you, that you're like, hey, I'm really good at this and I didn't realize that?
That's a really good question. I think if I were to think one thing that surprised me, it's actually strategic finance. So like I have a background and like I created my own major at Vanderbilt and it was in entrepreneurship. And then I also got a communications major too. And then so like, I was a consultant for a while, but it was more process stuff. It was more staff augmentation than it was true like strategy and analysis. And I weirdly found out that I'm not bad at like strategic modeling and like building ROI and business case plans and things like that. So based on, being a tennis coach and a consultant not focused on that area, and then an entrepreneur, I think I was, sort of relatively surprised that put a nice model together.
That's cool. Cool. I mean, those are interesting moments, right? Where you go, okay, yeah, that's a great example. So final thing about Hunt Club, as you look out over the next year, what has you most excited about the company?
Yeah, I think probably 3 things. One, just the macro tailwinds of just the general market. I think like we built this business in an environment where when we first started, no one really probably felt the need. Everyone understood the need of what we're doing, but it probably wasn't as evident. So I think we've got some pretty good tailwinds there. I think 2, we're kind of at that cool part of a business where you've sort of gotten product market fit. You've created and been able to fill a great experience for customers. And now it's figuring out how to scale your go-to-market. So we're going to get to invest in that, which, I've been wanting to do for 4 years. You look back at like all the plans you built in the early days of the business and you can kind of finally dust them off and say, okay, we're going to try this. So I think those 2 things have me really excited. And I think also the final thing is I think customers are starving for, great talent that really understands them and understands their business and can really help create enterprise value. And I think, getting to continue to work with, amazing customers, whether it's, the GoPuffs who just, raised $350 million and bought a major retailer, or the G2s in Chicago that are continuing to take on the Gartners and the Forresters of the world and them get awesome talent, or the, really a wide range of our customers. It's exciting being a partner to them to help them find people building their businesses. So it's energizing.
Very cool. Okay, we're going to switch directions a little. I talked in the intro about your tennis background. You played it at a high level in college. You coached it at a high level as well. I actually think of it a bit like being an entrepreneur versus kind of coaching and advising entrepreneurs. And you've done a little bit of both of that as well. So how has this tennis experience helped you as an entrepreneur?
Tennis is a great sport for becoming an entrepreneur because it's a sport where, if you enter a 128 person draw, there's only going to be one winner. So 127 other people, for lack of a better term, lost or are losers. And like, you still push forward every week and you still play and you still compete. So I think it's a great metaphor, not just for, I think, business, but just generally for life, that like it trained me to constantly trying to get better. It trained me to learn how to lose and come back the next day. And it trains you on just general self-improvement. I think self-awareness too. And so, if you can kind of build a framework to constantly look at yourself, understand where you're deficient, but be okay with knowing and coming back the next day to work on those things to make yourself better. I think that's probably like the most important skill set for any entrepreneur, right? Is not taking the losses too hard and being able to come back and work on your game, but playing, at least getting in the game so you can actually play and take the losses. So I think it was a really good preparation for this type of world. And I think, then the coaching side of it. So I coached at Northwestern for years, their women's tennis coach. Like that, I think helped give a little bit of an understanding as the team started to grow and as our company started to grow, is less about me playing, more about how do I make others great and how do I think about supporting them and helping them as people like hone their craft. And, I was, as a 22-year-old, working and running, and the team was amazing, and it was nothing to do with me. I came into it. Like our head coach was, she had won 13 Big Ten championships in a row. We were number one in the country. Like I was lucky to just get a seat on the team. So this is nothing to do with me, but watching how how she managed the team and built relationships and focused on recruiting and putting people in different positions to make themselves successful. I think there are a lot of comparisons to how to build a business. So it's been fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I have not looked back at my early days of playing tennis, but some of those examples that you just cited, I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time reflecting on some of the lessons that I probably learned from my years in that as well. So.
I've lost, I've probably won like in junior tennis before college, because there's not really as many tournaments. Probably won maybe 6 or 7 tournaments in 10 years of competing. So basically I was a loser at 500 other events. So it's like, it just teaches you a lot.
Sure. So. Yeah, really, really interesting to think about. That's cool. Talk about Chicago. You've been there for a while. I feel like I was there until through the .com crash, and then I moved to the West Coast. So I was there in a different era. I feel like Chicago's found its startup community legs in the last several years, at least from where I sit. What's really helped that happen from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think you look at the last decade, funds are kind of starting to get their stride. And if in 2007 or 8, the first funds were $7 to $15 million funds, most of them are on like fund 3 or 4 now, and they're 80 to 150, $200 million funds. So I think like that's helping fuel some capital into the environment. I think from just a marketing perspective, like some of the wins around, the Braintrees and the Groupons going public and the Grubhubs going public and that, those hyper growth moments coming out and actually, creating outcomes for people that necessarily didn't start those businesses, but help grow those companies, sure. Turn them into angel investors or aspiring founders. So it seeded the talent pool. And I think then the final thing is I think the coasts are starting to really get interested in some of the environments that we're building here and the frothiness of access to a majority of the Fortune 500. And I think as the tech world is starting to look at ideas that are untapped or not saturated, there's quite a bit in middle America that in agriculture or healthcare or, pick a space, manufacturing, construction, recycling, right? Like
yes.
Places that traditionally haven't been touched by technologists yet. We host a lot and house a lot of those businesses here and a lot of those resources and talent. So I think that to me, it's like sort of a perfect moment in time of like funding's getting better. the ideas seem more susceptible and accessible for external capital, and we're getting more and more talent that has at least maybe seen parts of the movie or seen the movie once or twice.
Mm-hmm. So if you rewind and you say, okay, if I were here 2005, let's say, in those early days, what things would you advise a community that maybe hasn't experienced some of that growth yet, hasn't experienced the capital flowing in, hasn't experienced the recycling? What would you advise them to be doing now in those early, to sort of build some of that foundation?
Yeah, I think it's being really truthful to yourself. So like in 2009 or 10, the first business I ever built was a social media app that was photo sharing. And so, my background was in like tennis and consulting and didn't necessarily like growth hacking and scaling a social media company. So I think it's like being really truthful to yourself and your environment and like what is the highest probability of success, and not necessarily just building the thing unless. And I guess the way I think of entrepreneurship is you either have the idea that you're so obsessed with that even if you have no subject matter expertise, knowledge of the space, history, experience, or contacts, like the thing's going to pull you along.
You're going to win on perseverance and passion.
Exactly.
Yep.
And like, I would really stress test like a lot of entrepreneurs and the things they're building to make sure that if it fits that, great. But if it doesn't fit that, then like what is a business or an idea or concept you could build that you can lever the unfair advantages of a geo, a background, a skill set, a contact, whatever it is, and making that like authentic to yourself, because then, the momentum of the business will carry you to the next stage and the next days when like maybe natural inception or like perseverance isn't quite there as much. And so, I would really advise like new ecosystems or new entrepreneurs and newer ecosystems to think about like, don't build a business just because you saw an Instagram post of like, someone exiting a company for $420 million. Like build the thing that either like drives you, that you're obsessed with, build the thing that you have an unfair advantage with. And then all the other stuff, capital, hiring, team, like it'll just naturally come. And I think the last would be like, just like focus on customers. Like, I think there's a lot of hoopla around like the obsession of raising capital and announcing loans. And like, I don't think, I felt like certainly the anxiety points of like, we haven't raised that much money yet. Like, why should we do that just to do it? Or, and then I would sort of go back to customers, right? Like when you have an awesome customer that's obsessed with your product or service and they love you, and you go and try to find more of those, like that's the most authentic way to build something successful.
Yeah, for sure. So good. How do you keep yourself innovative and sharp?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one at our stage too, where it's, my job is still very much in the business and then helping think where to take the business next. I think the nature and the luck, frankly, because it wasn't set up this way, is because of the type of business we started, which is a network effect oriented recruiting company. The conversations, whether it's just customer conversations or occasionally candidate conversations, if I'm actually working on a search, like create so many insights and information flow and ideas, and it allows us to really kind of apply some of those things to our business or even think about new ideas for our company. So, I think the cool thing about this business is that access to ideas and information is relatively endless from really inspiring people. That the hard thing sometimes is then prioritizing what we should actually do.
Sure. Yeah. It's almost, you could let the imagination go and say, we really almost end up being a traffic cop of this person who they're in a job, they're not happy in this job. Do they want another job, or do they really need to go start something?
Yeah.
There's some really interesting opportunities that could uncover through those conversations. So
totally.
Very, very cool. You're in a good spot. You can see why some venture funds set up talent platforms and other environments. I mean, I think you and I totally probably align that, as I say, typically if I have the choice, best team I can put on the court, on the field, whatever, I'm going to opt for that.
All day. Yeah. All day. It makes all the difference, right? Without a great team, and we're lucky to have one at Hunt Club, but like without a great team, it's not fun. It's hard. It's with the right team, it's still hard.
Sure. It's always hard.
It's just way more fun, and
That's right.
and you can actually get to some new levels and unlock new things.
Amazing. We're coming up on time. Last question. When you think of an entrepreneur operating a company like you're doing today, what's the one thing, I think I know what you're going to say, but what's the one thing that you think they should most focus on?
I think knowing their strengths and weaknesses and building around that, I think, is the most important thing. And then I think also like being really honest on the stage of the business and when to sequence that appropriately, right? Like, because I've seen people hire way too ahead of the curve on certain things and just get the profile person wrong, and that can really hurt a company. I've seen people do it way too late, and some of the early stage or founding DNA of the company doesn't really give the ability to scale. So I think it's the more that someone can pattern match what they're great at and what they need some help with against like the stage of their business in an authentic way, I think the higher probability for success.
Good stuff. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great conversation, as I expected it would. Amazing perspective and frankly, wisdom for as early in your career as you are. And I think that serves you well in your journey now as CEO and founder and entrepreneur. And I see it in the team around you that I know thinks so highly of you. So congratulations on all you've done so far. I'm super excited for what you're building and look forward to being a part of it with you. So thanks for really sharing how you operate with me today.
Thank you, Kerry. I really appreciate the conversation as always, and lucky to be on it. And you're hearing, I live across the church, so you get the bells every hour reminding me to stay focused.
That's right. We ended just on time. Well, thanks. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Operate Podcast. If you like this conversation, as a favor to me, you can rate us, review us, or subscribe, or tell your friends. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at Operate Podcast. Until next week, get out there and operate.